In a quiet little neighborhood surrounded by tall trees and winding roads, there was a beautiful lake that sparkled in the sunlight. It wasn't just any lake, it was the heart of the community. People loved walking along its shores, fishing on lazy afternoons, or simply sitting by the water to unwind. But for one resident, this lake represented something more, an opportunity to create something unforgettable. This person, let's call them Alex, had always been someone who dreamed big. They weren't flashy or loud. Instead, they were the kind of person who worked behind the scenes, thinking up creative ideas and making things happen without much fuss. Alex ran a small tech business during the day, but spent their free time dreaming about ways to bring people together. Whether it was organizing charity events or setting up fun activities at local parks, Alex believed that life was better when shared with others. One evening, as Alex sat on their porch watching the sun dip below the horizon, casting golden ripples across the lake, an idea struck them. What if they threw a party, not just any party, but a floating party right on the water? Imagine inflatable platforms, decorated with colorful lights, music playing softly enough to enjoy but loud enough to dance to, and friends paddling over in kayaks or rowboats to join in the fun. The thought made Alex grin from ear to ear. This could be the ultimate summer celebration, something everyone would remember for years to come. But there was one problem: the Homeowners Association, HOA. If you've ever lived in a neighborhood, with an HOA, you know how strict they can be. These groups are supposed to keep things orderly, but sometimes they go overboard. In this case, the HOA ruled everything from what color houses could be painted to how loud backyard barbecues could get. They even had rules about where people could park their cars overnight. And parties? Forget about it. The HOA hated anything that might disturb the peace, no matter how harmless it seemed. Still, Alex wasn't ready to give up on their dream. After all, part of the lake was public property, which meant the HOA didn't own it entirely. That gave Alex some wiggle room. So they started researching permits, official documents that allowed certain activities to take place legally. To their surprise, they discovered that hosting an event on a public body of water required federal approval. It sounded complicated, but Alex dived into the process head first. They filled out forms, submitted detailed plans for the party, and included safety measures like life jackets, first aid kits, and designated swimming areas. Everything checked out. But here's where things got interesting. Because the lake bordered private property controlled by the HOA, the permit application needed additional signatures. Specifically, it required approval from local authorities, including none other than the HOA president herself. Now, the HOA president was a woman named Linda Harper. She was known for being tough as nails and sticking rigidly to the rules. Her signature was practically gold in the neighborhood. If she said no, then nothing moved forward. But Alex noticed something crucial while filling out the paperwork. Since the event involved public land, Linda's electronic signature had already been registered through previous agreements between the HOA and federal agencies. All Alex had to do was submit the application correctly, and voila. Linda unknowingly signed off on the very thing she'd probably hate most. With the permit secured, Alex sent out invitations. Social media posts buzzed with excitement. Friends tagged friends, and soon the whole neighborhood knew about the upcoming lake party. Floats were rented, food trucks booked, and speakers tested. Everyone wanted to be part of it. There was only one group of people who weren't thrilled, a handful of neighbors loyal to Linda and her strict ways. They muttered under their breath, saying things like, "This is going to ruin the lake," or "It'll be too noisy." Some even called Linda directly, urging her to shut it down before it began. As the big day approached, Alex felt a mix of nerves and excitement. They dotted every I and crossed every T, ensuring everything was above board. Still, they couldn't shake the feeling that trouble might be brewing. Little did they know, those grumbles among the neighbors were about to turn into something far bigger and far more dramatic than anyone expected. The stage was set. The floats were ready. The music playlist was queued up. All that remained was to see whether the party would go off without a hitch or become the talk of the town for entirely different reasons. The day of the party finally arrived, and the lake transformed into a scene straight out of a dream. The morning started early for Alex, who had been up since sunrise overseeing the final preparations. Inflatables in every color imaginable were anchored securely to create floating platforms scattered across the water. Strings of twinkling fairy lights crisscrossed between them, ready to glow once the sun went down. A DJ booth was set up on one of the larger platforms, complete with speakers that promised just the right amount of bass, not too loud to disturb anyone but enough to get people moving. By noon, food trucks began rolling in, parking along the shore near the dock. The smell of grilled burgers, tacos, and fresh popcorn wafted through the air, drawing curious neighbors who weren't even invited yet. Kids ran around excitedly, pointing at the kayaks lined up by the water's edge, while parents snapped photos of the growing spectacle. It wasn't long before word spread like wildfire. Even folks who hadn't planned to attend found themselves drawn to the energy buzzing around the lake. As the afternoon turned into evening, guests started arriving in droves. Some came by boat, others paddled over in kayaks or canoes, and a few brave souls swam out to join the fun. Laughter echoed across the water as friends reunited and strangers struck up conversations. Music began playing softly at first, setting a relaxed vibe, but as more people joined in, the tempo picked up. Soon, groups of dancers moved freely on the inflatable platforms, their movements reflected in the shimmering surface of the lake below. It was magical, exactly what Alex had envisioned. The combination of music, laughter, and the gentle lapping of water created an atmosphere that felt both lively and serene. People couldn't stop talking about how unique the whole thing was. "I've never seen anything like this," one guest said, sipping a cold drink while leaning against the railing of a rented pontoon boat. Another chimed in, "This is genius. Who thinks of something like this?" But not everyone was thrilled. Across the lake, tucked away behind closed curtains, Linda Harper watched the scene unfold with growing frustration. She'd heard the rumors leading up to the event, of course, but seeing it all come to life in front of her eyes made her blood boil. To her, this wasn't just a party. It was a direct challenge to her authority. How dare someone turn her neighborhood lake into a carnival without her permission? Linda wasn't alone in her disapproval. A small group of neighbors, loyal to her vision of order and control, gathered at her house to voice their complaints. "It's too loud," one man grumbled, though the music was barely audible from where they stood. "And look at all those boats. Someone's going to get hurt." Another neighbor added, "We pay good money to live here for peace and quiet, not whatever this is." Favored by their support, Linda decided it was time to act. She picked up her phone and dialed the local police department, filing a noise complaint. Her tone was firm, almost smug, as she explained that the HOA had received multiple calls about the disturbance. "This isn't just some casual gathering," she insisted. "It's completely out of hand. You need to shut it down immediately." Back at the party, no one suspected what was coming. The mood remained high as the sun dipped lower, painting the sky in shades of orange and pink. As darkness fell, the fairy lights flickered on, casting a warm glow over the water. The DJ cranked up the volume slightly, and cheers erupted when a popular song came on. Everyone was having such a great time that the sudden appearance of flashing red and blue lights seemed almost surreal. A police cruiser pulled up to the edge of the lake, its headlights cutting through the dusk. Two officers stepped out, their expressions serious as they scanned the crowd. Murmurs rippled through the partygoers. "What's going on?" someone asked nervously. Others shrugged it off, assuming it was just routine. But then the officers called out for the organizer to step forward. Alex felt a knot tighten in their stomach but forced themselves to stay calm. This was bound to happen eventually, given the HOA's reputation. Taking a deep breath, they waded through the crowd until they reached the officers. "Hi," Alex said, trying to sound friendly despite the tension in the air. "Is everything okay?" One of the officers held up a hand, signaling for quiet. "We've received a noise complaint," he said, his voice steady. "Some residents claim this event is disrupting the neighborhood. We're going to have to ask you to wrap things up." For a moment, the entire party froze. Guests exchanged worried glances, unsure of what would happen next. But Alex didn't panic. Instead, they reached into their bag and pulled out a neatly folded document, the federal permit they'd worked so hard to secure. Handing it over to the officers, Alex explained, "This is fully authorized. I've got all the necessary approvals, including safety measures and permissions from local authorities." The officers looked skeptical at first, flipping through the pages under the dim light of their flashlights. Then one of them paused, his eyebrows shooting up as he spotted something unusual. "Wait a second," he muttered, tapping the page with his finger. His partner leaned in to take a closer look, and both men exchanged surprised glances. "What is it?" Alex asked, though they already knew the answer. The officer hesitated before responding. "It looks like this permit has the signature of your HOA president." The crowd let out a collective gasp. Whispers broke out as people realized what this meant. Meanwhile, back at her house, Linda Harper remained oblivious to the bombshell that had just dropped. Oblivious, that is, until her phone started ringing nonstop. Calls poured in from neighbors demanding answers, reporters asking for comments, and even members of the HOA board questioning how she could have signed off on something she clearly despised now. By the time the officers confirmed the permit's legitimacy and left without issuing any citations, the damage was done. The party continued, but the real drama was only beginning. And as Alex stood there watching the chaos unfold, they couldn't help but smile. Sometimes life had a way of serving justice in the most unexpected and satisfying ways. The fallout from the police visit didn't take long to spiral into pure chaos. As soon as the officers confirmed the permit was legitimate and left, the crowd erupted into a mix of cheers and stunned murmurs. People couldn't believe what had just happened. One moment it seemed like the party might get shut down, and the next it turned into a David versus Goliath-style victory against the HOA. The news spread faster than wildfire thanks to smartphones and social media. Someone in the crowd, probably one of the younger guests, snapped a photo of the permit and zoomed in on the signature at the bottom. It wasn't hard to miss. There it was, bold as day, the name of the HOA president herself, written neatly in black ink. Within minutes, the image was uploaded online with captions like, "Guess who signed off on this party?" and "When bureaucracy bites back." Before long, screenshots of the post were circulating everywhere, accompanied by memes mocking the HOA's rigid rules and their leader's accidental role in the whole fiasco. Meanwhile, Linda Harper sat in her living room completely unaware of the storm brewing around her. She'd been pacing back and forth for hours, congratulating herself on filing the noise complaint. To her, calling the cops had felt like the ultimate power move, a way to assert control over the neighborhood she prided herself on keeping orderly. But when her phone started buzzing nonstop, she knew something was wrong. At first, she ignored the calls, assuming they were just more complaints about the party. But when texts and notifications began flooding in, curiosity got the better of her. She opened her phone to find dozens of messages, most of them sarcastic or downright hostile. One neighbor wrote, "Funny how you signed off on the very thing you're trying to shut down now." Another simply sent a laughing emoji followed by a screenshot of the permit with her signature circled in bright red. Linda's face turned pale as she scrolled through the posts. Her stomach churned with a mix of anger and embarrassment. How could this have happened? She hadn't personally reviewed the application. That was supposed to be handled by her assistant. But clearly, her electronic signature had been used in some official capacity. Now everyone thought she'd given her blessing to the floating lake party, even though she'd spent weeks griping about it behind closed doors. Unable to contain her frustration, Linda stormed out of her house and marched down to the edge of the lake. By now, the party was in full swing again, louder and livelier than before. Guests danced under the fairy lights, laughed over plates of food, and cheered every time a new song came on. When Linda arrived, red-faced and fuming, people noticed immediately. Conversations paused and heads turned as she pushed her way through the crowd until she reached Alex. "You!" she spat, pointing a finger dramatically. "This is outrageous. You forged my signature, didn't you? This whole thing is illegal." Alex raised an eyebrow, unfazed by her theatrics. They'd been expecting this confrontation ever since the officers left. Keeping their tone calm but firm, they replied, "I didn't forge anything. That's your real signature on the permit. If you want to accuse me of wrongdoing, maybe you should check your own paperwork first." The crowd gasped audibly. Some people snickered, others whispered among themselves, and a few even pulled out their phones to record the exchange. Linda, realizing she was being watched and recorded, tried to backtrack. "Well, I never approved this," she stammered. "It must have been some sort of clerical error." Alex wasn't about to let her off the hook that easily. Pulling out their phone, they opened their email app and scrolled to a thread labeled Lake Event Approval Process. Holding it up for everyone to see, they said, "Here's the confirmation email showing your office gave the green light. And here's the document with your electronic signature. Unless you're saying someone hacked into your system, this is all legit." Linda sputtered, unable to come up with a coherent response. The harder she tried to deny responsibility, the more ridiculous she sounded. Finally, she threw up her hands in exasperation. "Fine, but this doesn't change the fact that this party is disruptive and dangerous. Someone could get hurt out here." Her words fell flat. No one in the crowd looked convinced. In fact, several people called her out right then and there. "Dangerous, really?" one man shouted. "My kids have been swimming in this lake for years without any issues. What's so different today?" Another chimed in. "If anything, this party has brought the neighborhood together. Maybe you should try joining us instead of complaining all the time." Linda opened her mouth to argue, but quickly realized she was fighting a losing battle. The more she talked, the angrier the crowd became. Even some of her usual supporters, the ones who'd encouraged her to call the cops earlier, seemed hesitant to back her up now. After a few tense moments, she spun on her heel and stormed off, muttering under her breath about reckless behavior and lack of respect. But the drama didn't end there. By the time Linda returned home, videos of her meltdown at the party had gone viral. Social media exploded with reactions, ranging from sympathetic comments about her public humiliation to outright mockery. Memes featuring her signature became the talk of the internet, with captions like, "When you accidentally endorse your worst nightmare," and "Signature Fail of the Year." Locally, the story dominated conversations at coffee shops, grocery stores, and school drop-offs. Everyone had an opinion, and most leaned toward siding with Alex. The HOA board caught wind of the situation almost immediately. Members began receiving angry emails and phone calls from residents questioning why Linda had allowed such a glaring oversight to happen. A special meeting was called for the following week, but whispers of dissatisfaction grew louder each day. Some board members suggested Linda resign quietly to save face, while others argued she should apologize publicly and work to repair her damaged reputation. For Alex, the aftermath was surreal. They hadn't planned for any of this to blow up the way it did, but they couldn't deny the satisfaction of seeing the HOA's iron grip loosen, even if just a little. Still, they weren't interested in gloating. Instead, they focused on making sure the rest of the party went smoothly. As the night wore on, the atmosphere shifted from tense to celebratory once again. People joked about Linda's tantrum, shared stories of past run-ins with the HOA, and toasted to the idea that sometimes standing up to authority could lead to unexpected victories. By the time the last float was towed away and the final guest paddled back to shore, the floating lake party had cemented its place in local legend. For many attendees, it wasn't just a fun evening. It was proof that creativity, determination, and a little bit of humor could overcome even the strictest systems. And, as for Linda Harper, well, her days as the untouchable ruler of the neighborhood were numbered. The morning after the floating lake party, the neighborhood woke up to a buzz unlike anything it had ever experienced. News of the dramatic showdown between Alex and Linda spread like wildfire, not just locally but across social media platforms. By breakfast time, hashtags like Lake Party Drama and Ho Fail were trending online. People who lived miles away from the lake were sharing memes and commenting on posts, turning what started as a small community event into a national talking point. For Linda Harper, the aftermath was brutal. She woke up to find her phone flooded with notifications, angry texts from HOA members, mocking messages from neighbors, and even emails from strangers chiming in with their 2 cents. Her attempt to maintain authority had backfired spectacularly, leaving her reputation in tatters. The viral videos of her confrontation with Alex played on repeat across various platforms, each clip accompanied by snarky captions like, "When bureaucracy meets karma," or "The Queen of Rules gets ruled." Linda tried to salvage the situation by issuing a formal statement through the HOA's official channels. In it, she claimed that the permit must have been obtained under false pretenses and insisted that she would never knowingly approve such an event. But her words rang hollow. Evidence proved otherwise. Emails showed clear communication between her office and federal agencies, and her electronic signature was indisputably authentic. Instead of calming the storm, her statement only fueled more ridicule. Commenters tore into her explanation, accusing her of deflecting blame rather than owning up to her mistake. Meanwhile, Alex became something of a local hero. Neighbors who had previously kept their distance now approached them with smiles and pats on the back. At the grocery store, people stopped to chat, congratulating Alex for outsmarting the HOA. Some even admitted they'd secretly enjoyed watching the drama unfold, saying things like, "It's about time someone stood up to Linda." Others thanked Alex for bringing excitement to the neighborhood, noting how long it had been since the community felt this alive. Local news outlets jumped on the story, sending reporters to interview both sides. Camera crews set up near the lake, capturing footage of the calm waters where the party had taken place just hours earlier. A reporter interviewed Alex, who handled the attention gracefully. When asked about the chaos surrounding the event, Alex shrugged and said, "I didn't set out to cause trouble. I just wanted to throw a fun party and bring people together. If the HOA has a problem with that, maybe they need to rethink their priorities." On the other side of the spectrum, Linda refused most interviews, citing personal reasons. However, a few board members spoke on her behalf, attempting to defend her actions while distancing themselves from the controversy. One member told a reporter, "This is an unfortunate misunderstanding. We're reviewing our internal processes to ensure something like this doesn't happen again." Their vague response did little to quell criticism, especially since many residents saw it as an admission of incompetence. As days turned into weeks, the pressure on Linda mounted. Calls for her resignation grew louder, particularly among younger families who felt stifled by her strict policies. Petitions circulated online, urging the HOA board to replace her with someone more open-minded. Even longtime supporters began wavering, unsure whether standing by her was worth the backlash. Board meetings, once sparsely attended, were suddenly packed with angry residents demanding answers and accountability. Behind closed doors, tensions within the HOA reached a boiling point. Board members argued over how to handle the crisis, with some pushing for immediate action and others advising caution. Linda dug in her heels, refusing to step down despite the mounting criticism. She insisted she was being unfairly targeted, and vowed to fight back against what she called a witch hunt. But her defiance only deepened the divide, alienating her further from both the board and the community. In the midst of all this, Alex decided to use the spotlight for good. They launched a crowdfunding campaign to clean up the lake area, ensuring no one could accuse them of leaving behind a mess. Volunteers signed up in droves, eager to help restore the shoreline and remove any trash left over from the party. It was a smart move. Not only did it counteract negative stereotypes about large gatherings, but it also showed Alex's commitment to the neighborhood. The cleanup effort turned into another opportunity to bond with neighbors. Families brought snacks and drinks, kids played games on the grass, and older residents shared stories about the lake's history. For the first time in years, the community came together not because they were forced to by HOA mandates, but because they genuinely wanted to make a difference. Alex stood back and watched it all unfold, feeling a sense of pride they hadn't anticipated. Back at the HOA headquarters, cracks in Linda's leadership continued to widen. Several board members resigned, citing irreconcilable differences with her approach. Attendance at monthly meetings plummeted, and those who showed up often spent more time debating her future than addressing actual neighborhood issues. Eventually, even her staunchest allies began suggesting she consider stepping aside for the sake of the organization's survival. Finally, after months of relentless scrutiny and dwindling support, Linda made the decision to resign. She released a brief statement blaming external pressures and claiming she needed to focus on personal matters. While some speculated she was simply trying to save face, others breathed a sigh of relief. Her departure marked the beginning of a new chapter for the HOA, one that promised to be less rigid and more inclusive. With Linda gone, the board elected a younger, more progressive leader who prioritized collaboration over control. Under their guidance, the HOA introduced relaxed rules around gatherings and encouraged community events like block parties and outdoor movie nights. Slowly but surely, the neighborhood began to heal, shedding its reputation as a place ruled by red tape and embracing a spirit of connection instead. For Alex, the whole ordeal served as a reminder of the power of creativity and perseverance. What started as a simple idea for a fun summer party had evolved into a catalyst for change, proving that sometimes breaking free from unnecessary restrictions could lead to something truly extraordinary. And while they never intended to spark a revolution, they couldn't deny the impact their floating lake party had on the community, for better or worse. Months after the floating lake party, life in the neighborhood began to settle into a new rhythm. The drama had died down, but its effects lingered like ripples on water. For many residents, the event marked a turning point, a moment when they realized how much they craved connection and fun, even if it meant bending a few rules along the way. It wasn't just about the party itself. It was about what came after, the conversations, the shared laughter, and the sense of belonging that had been missing for so long. Alex found themselves at the center of this shift, not because they sought attention, but because people kept seeking them out. Neighbors who once barely acknowledged their existence now waved enthusiastically whenever they passed by. Parents stopped Alex at the park to thank them for bringing some excitement to the community. Kids asked if there would be another floating party next summer, to which Alex always replied with a playful, maybe. Even the local coffee shop owner started giving Alex free drinks as a gesture of gratitude. But perhaps the most surprising outcome was how the party changed the way people thought about the HOA. Before, it had been seen as an unshakable force, dictating every aspect of life in the neighborhood. Now, its power felt more fragile, like something that could be challenged and redefined. The resignation of Linda Harper symbolized more than just one person stepping down. It represented a broader shift toward openness and flexibility. Under the new leadership, the HOA became less of a policing body and more of a facilitator, encouraging events and activities that brought people together instead of tearing them apart. For Alex, the experience also opened unexpected doors. Inspired by the success of the floating lake party and the overwhelming support from the community, they decided to turn their knack for organizing unique events into a side business. They named it Floating Adventures, a nod to the original party that started it all. Word spread quickly, and soon Alex was fielding requests from nearby towns and cities. Some wanted help planning unconventional parties, while others sought advice on hosting community-building events. Within months, Floating Adventures grew into something bigger than Alex ever imagined, allowing them to leave their tech job behind and focus on what truly made them happy, creating moments people would remember forever. The lake, too, underwent a transformation. Once a quiet spot reserved for solitary walks or occasional fishing trips, it became a hub of activity. Families gathered there on weekends for picnics, teens practiced paddleboarding, and groups of friends organized impromptu kayaking adventures. The cleanup effort Alex spearheaded inspired others to take ownership of the space, ensuring it remained beautiful for years to come. Slowly, the lake evolved into a symbol of unity, a place where everyone felt welcome, regardless of age, background, or HOA membership status. As time went on, stories of the infamous lake party took on a life of their own. Parents told their kids exaggerated tales of the night the cops showed up only to leave empty-handed. Teenagers joked about the memes that flooded social media, quoting lines like, when your own signature calls you out. Even Linda's name became part of the lore, though she eventually moved away to escape the constant reminders of her downfall. To her credit, no one held a grudge, not really. Most people agreed that while her methods were flawed, she likely meant well in her own rigid way. Looking back, Alex often reflected on how everything unfolded. At first glance, the floating lake party seemed like a simple idea, a chance to have fun and bring people together. But it turned into so much more. A lesson in standing up for what you believe in, a reminder of the importance of community, and proof that sometimes the best way to fight absurdity is with creativity and humor. Still, Alex knew none of it would have happened without the support of those around them. Sure, they'd done the legwork, securing permits, organizing logistics, and facing off against Linda. But the real magic came from the people who showed up, danced under the stars, and embraced the chaos. Without them, the party wouldn't have been nearly as memorable or impactful. One evening, as Alex sat on their porch watching the sunset over the lake, they noticed a group of neighbors gathered near the shore. Someone had brought a guitar, and soft music drifted through the air. Kids chased each other with glow sticks, their laughter echoing across the water. A few adults floated lazily in kayaks, chatting quietly as the sky turned shades of pink and purple. It was peaceful, a stark contrast to the lively chaos of that summer night months ago, but equally beautiful in its own way. Alex smiled, feeling a deep sense of satisfaction. The neighborhood wasn't perfect. It never would be. But it was better, friendlier, more connected, and in a world that often felt divided, that was something worth celebrating. In the end, the floating lake party wasn't just about winning an argument with the HOA or proving a point. It was about showing that joy and creativity could break down barriers, even in places where rules usually reigned supreme. It was about reminding everyone, from skeptical neighbors to stubborn HOA presidents, that life is better when we share it with others. And most importantly, it was about proving that sometimes all it takes is one bold idea to spark a wave of change.